Hi, I'm JensFudge. I've been working with Delphi since it came out back in 1995. I'm an Embarcadero MVP. I'm a senior developer in my own company, Archersoft, and there I work also as a trainer and a consultant for other companies. This skill sprint, it works with Windows, Mac OS X, Android, iOS, and it works with Rad Studio and/or App Method, and it works with Object Pascal and C++, whichever is your favorite, and it also works with VCL and FireMonkey. So make your choices, pick whichever combination you want, and off we go. Skillprints work in this way. We've got 20 minutes, so I'm not going to be on this slide very long. Please go ahead, download the free trial if you haven't got it already, and let's get on with the discussion. FireDAC Skill Sprints, I've got this agenda for there are 10 skill sprints about FireDAC this spring, or the winter and spring. This one here is number 3 in the row with cached updates and auto-incremented fields. Auto-incremented fields in FireDAC and cached updates in FireDAC. I'm going to show you a little bit about which is which and how to use them. Auto-increment fields, they are fields typically used as primary keys being non-information bearing primary keys, so you cannot deduct anything from the primary key apart from the record itself. And the thing that you can do very easy in FireDAC is acquiring the value of the primary key after you have inserted a record. What about cached updates? Well, the easiest way to explain what cached updates is to first explain what it's not. Normally, if you have a T data set and you make changes on the records, the records updates are written to the database on a record-by-record basis. So you call post, or you call first, or you call last, or you call prior or next. Those latter will all automatically call post for you, but then upon the post you'll apply the update to the underlying database for every other user to see. With cached updates, however, all updates that you make are in memory until the user or you as the developer decide, well, I'm going to apply these updates now in a batch operation. Why use cached updates? Well, there are quite a few advantages, and you can first of all apply or discard all the changes at will. You can preview and even you can modify the cache, so you can on a record-by-record basis you can discard or approve changes, thus making it possible for the user to review all the changes he's made and then say, yeah, okay, I'll modify this record, or oh no, I did not want to do this. You can even persist the cache to a local file, so you can have multiple sessions with the cache intact, so you have a briefcase application. But do remember that data grows old, so the longer you have data in your cache, the older it'll get, and potentially other users will have changed records or even deleted them, and you'll have to be able to handle those situations. So let's dive into a demonstration on Delphi and see how we can create a database on the fly with auto-incremented fields, and how to retrieve the auto-incremented value once we've inserted a record. I'm going to use the same demo app to demonstrate some various possibilities with cached updates. So I have here my favorite tool, Delphi. And on this tool I have a couple of buttons here. This is the sequence I'm going to show the different things, and some GUI for this. To create the database, I'm going to call on my data module create database procedure, which is a SQLite database I'm going to use. I'm going to use the tpath.getDocuments path, so I'm sure that I get the database file stored in the correct place. This works also on iOS and Android, remember, and the database will be in a sandbox. And I'm going to put the SQLite params values database to this file, and I'm going to call the file cachedupdates.s3db, which is version 3 of the SQLite database. The syntax of creating a database and the tables is well, create table, if not exists, customer. And as I told you, I'm going to have a auto increment field. So the field customer number is an integer, and it's a primary key, and it's an auto increment field, and it's not null. And then I have obviously some other fields to make sense here. So company name, address, city, and country. I'm going to, for demonstration purposes, also have an orders table, and I'm doing this in the exact same manner. So I'm going to create the table if it doesn't exist, and it has an auto increment key called order number. That's going to create the database. And if I go to the insert start data, that's going to call a procedure I have calling, inserting some data into the database tables. So I have a couple of queries that I create on the fly. I select all from customer where 1 equals 2. This is going to be empty. This is just for me to get an open cursor to a data set. And when I call insert, I insert the I insert the record, and then I have I put the name and address of the individual customer, and then I call post. Now, calling post, as I explained before, posts this to the underlying database, and as this does have an auto increment field as primary key, I get that primary key back in the field. Very, very handy. It's just there. It just works, and I get this into the primary key. So now I can use this primary key here and insert an order in the order table. Just putting a salesman, putting customer number as the foreign key up to the primary key thing, and calling post. So I'm inserting here a few records just for demonstration purposes. So I'm going to run this application, and I'm going to run it without the debugger so you can follow along as we go. Creating the database, and I'm inserting start data, and then I'm going to open the query. This opens both the orders query and the customer query, and as you can see here, I have the 4 companies. If I press the button show orders, I get orders for the company that I'm currently on. So I see here that's Jim Keith, and I show orders on UNESCO, and I've got Pavak. But I can also show all orders, and that will give me all the orders regardless of the customer number. Now, how did I do that? Well, I go to my orders query and see the SQL for that, and that is select all from orders where customer number is the parameter customer number, or the parameter is null. If I set the parameter to null, this will get all the records in the underlying table. And the way I call that is show orders will call the form I have. I have a T form orders with a method, a class method, show orders, that takes self, which is my form, form 1, and the field by name customer number dot value. If I instead show all orders, it's the same form I'm showing, but I pass null as the second parameter on the show orders form. The show orders form, this is the way I normally do modal windows, is I have the procedure, class procedure show orders, and on the class procedure when I call that, I create the form orders is tFormOrders.create, and I set the pop-up parent to the calling form, and this is to make sure that the modal window stays on top of the calling form, and then that's this Z order that sometimes messes up on Windows. And then I reopen the query, but passing the parameter customer number, which can be an integer or null, into the SQL. And then I just show modal, and finally I release the form. So that's the bit about auto increment fields. And let's go to some cached updates. Now, if I do any changes now, this is going to change in the underlying database. If, however, I enable the cache, which I've done now, I've enabled the cache. Now, I enable the cache is just by setting a property. Actually, here, this enables the cache. If it wasn't in cached updates mode, it now is, or vice versa. There's a bit of code here because If I had updates pending, that means there's something in the cache. I would not be allowed to exit the cached update mode. So I'll have to decide whether or not to keep or discard those changes. However, if I have no records here, I can just exit the cached update modes. And to make sure that I can follow where I am, I'm just going to change the caption on the button. Now, setting the cached update mode to a query on runtime works fine, but do not do it on the TFT table, as I wrote here in comments. That won't work. That's only on design time. Okay, so I have the cached updates. I have the cache enabled. So now I can change. Let's say I'm changing the Kawaii Dive shop to the bit newer way. I can now actually see on the status here that it's modified, and I can view the cache. I have the cache down here, so every change I make is going to go in the cache. So I'm going to rename UNESCO to UNESCO Company. Okay, and I'm going to call post. I can move off the record, or I can call post. So now that one is modified too, and it's in the cache. I can even add a record, and that could be a company. So that's a brilliant name for a company. And as you notice, the customer number now is -1. I can add another one, and that's another company, and I get the customer number assigned -2. So even if I'm in cached update mode, the auto increment field still works. Now I'm just getting the negative version of any integers because I'm in the cache mode. Let me refresh the cache here, so you can see I've now got 4 changes in the cache. I've got 2 modified records, and I've got 2 inserted records. Now, to display which records are inserted or modified or even deleted, I can go ahead and I can delete site diver. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm going to delete that one. Yep. So now I can see I have a deleted record in the cache. In order to be able to do that, I have on my query order set a calculated field, and this has a query customer. This has a calculated fields event handler, and the update status is either unmodified, modified, inserted, or deleted. And I've added this calculated field to the query, and I'm just putting the string into the unmodified, modified, inserted, or deleted. To be able to browse through the cache as well as browsing through the normal query, I have cloned the cursor with a TFD memtable, so I've called that mem cache view, and this has the same event handler on calc fields. It also has the same calculated field added to it. So enabling cache sets the cached updates to true. Viewing the cache, here I first check if I even have the query customer active, otherwise it doesn't make sense. I then clone the cursor on the customer, and when I've cloned the cursor, I can now browse in the grid for the cache. I set the filter changes to so I can only see RT modified, RT inserted, and RT deleted records. I don't want to see also the unmodified records because then it'll be a view of all the records, which doesn't really make sense here. Okay, so that's viewing the cache that I'm doing here. Now I can also view the old value of a given record. Viewing the old record here, I go on the query customer and I check in this case I'm only viewing the company field. So the company field has a old value property, and it also has a value property. So when I run that, view the old value on the modified UNESCO company, I'm going to see that the old value was UNESCO and the new value was UNESCO company. Okay, so this makes the user able to see which changes that he has made. Now I can see I deleted the site diver company. I did not want to do that, so I'm going to undo the last change. I remember that deleting that was the last thing I did. So now it's unmodified and it's back up here in the original query. Everything is still in cache, but this one is now unmodified. I am just going to refresh the cache view here, so it's gone from the cache here. Now, undoing the last change is very easy, but it only undoes the last change. So undo last change is calling on the dataset undo last change, passing true, sets the cursor to the record that was reverted. So it doesn't matter which record you were on, when pressing on undo last change, it will undo the last change. Right. But let's say you want to do a specific change. This UNESCO company, I did not want to do that. I did not want to call UNESCO company. That was a mistake. So I'm going to revert that record. So I've got UNESCO back up here. There was a bit of delay on refreshing, but never mind about that. It's still now in the original state. And when I go to see how this is done, undo the last change. Oh, sorry, that was not the one. Revert the record. I go to the FD memtable and I revert record because that's the one I'm pointing out. Because otherwise, I wouldn't be able to undo deleted records. If I say, well, never mind, I'm not going to do any of the updates that I've done, I'm going to cancel everything. View the cache. The cache is now empty. I've only got 4 records. The 4 records that I started with, they all spelt the original ways. I've cancelled everything. And the way to do that is straightforward. There's on the query customer a method called cancel updates that just does it. Cancel update, as you can see, also clears the cache. Another very nifty thing is the ability to create a save point. I've got 2 integer variables here in my system, and they're just integers, and I'm checking if save point 1 is 0, then I'm going to set it to my dataset's save point, which is actually a version number of the cache. If that was not 0, then I'm going to set it to save point 2 instead. So I've got 2 here. You could obviously have as many as you want. You can have an array of save points. So you can have go back to a specific save point at any given time. To demonstrate how this is working, I'm going to make first a alteration to Kawaii Dive Shop. I've now got that one modified. I'm going to create a save point here. Now I'm going to rename UNESCO to UNESCO company. I keep spelling that wrong. UNESCO company. And now I've changed that one since the last save point, and I'm going to change Site Diver to Site Diver World. And now I'm going to create yet another save point, and I'm going to take the Cayman Divers World Unlimited and remove the word unlimited on it. So now I've modified all the records in my data set. But now I want to go back to a save point, so I press the button go back to save point, and it unmodifies this. I can refresh the cache. It unmodifies the Cayman Divers World Unlimited, and go back to save point again. It's going to unmodify the 2 other records that I modified, but not the first one. So now I have hit save point twice, and I've gone back to the save point. And going back to the save point, well, it's just as easy as creating a save point, as I have 2 here, I'm going to just go and say, well, if save point 2 has been used, I'm going to set the query customer save point to save point 2. And then I'm going to set the save point 2 to 0, and else number 1, and set that to 0, and if there weren't any more, well, nothing happens. So that's good. There's one note though. The save points may break, and they may break if the records in the cache have been removed from that cache with revert record or anything else, and the save point in that manner has to be intact. So if you use revert records and save points, you may not always get the thing that you try to, what you expect. Last thing I'm going to show you is how to apply the updates. To apply the updates, I pass a parameter on the call to apply updates, -1. -1 means it's going to try to apply all updates. If I pass 0, it's going to stop as soon as it reaches an error. If I apply 1, I will allow 1 error, and you could also have 5 or 10 or how many errors you're going to allow, and it will just keep on applying errors until the max number has been reached. If error is larger than 0, there's a way that you can view which records are in error state, and that's by setting the FD memtable, the memcache view I set, put its filter changes to RT has errors, which will just put all the error-prone records in the cache view that I've built. And whether or not it works, you can do this in transactions. You can roll back. You can do loads of stuff here. It really depends on what you're trying to accomplish. So you can roll back if 1 record fails, or you can roll back if 5 record fails, or you can just, okay, I'll just live with the ones that I want. But as soon as you're finished, you still have to flush the cache, and flushing the cache is done by calling commit updates. Applying updates would, in the old BDE days, also flush the cache, but applying the updates alone will not flush the cache in FireDAC. We'll have to commit the updates to the local dataset, and thus flushing the cache. When I say that errors can occur, that's obviously because, well, this is a database that's potentially a multi-user database, so other users could have changed records here. If other users change records, it's very different how you want to check who gets to post their changes. So I'm just going to expand the window here so you can see everything, and say that on the dataset there's an update options, update mode property that you can set to up where all, up where changed, or up where key only. If it's up where all, so if another user changed anything at all on that record, the dataset will make a SQL that compares all the fields. So if someone else changed it, this will fail, and the other user has 1. If up where changed is set, however, so if the other user change any other field that the fields that you're changing, it'll try to merge that. So the other user can change the address field, and you can change the name field, and you'll both win. If the other user change also the name field, then he will win in this case. Or you can go by the up where key only mode, and if you go by the up where key only mode, that means that you win, because you're going to find a record in the database with that primary key if it's not been deleted, and you're going to update it, and it's going to overwrite everything else that someone else has put there. The last apply updates to button isn't actually doing anything. That's just some comments, because I want to explain that you can just run through the cache, and you can use the individual fields value versus the old values, and you can write your own SQL on basis of that, and you can do whatever you want. This can get very creative and constructive or destructive depending on how you look at it. So you can do whatever you want to do here. You can write whatever SQL ever makes sense here. if you go by this way, you won't call apply updates at all. You'll just call commit updates. That just flushes the cache again. And that will commit the updates to the dataset, but not to the underlying database, because you've already done that with insert SQLs or update SQLs. So this is the code that I was going to show on this presentation. And of course, the code is downloadable, and you can download the code from my website, archersoft.dk/download/cachedupdates.zip. You can also find more information on auto-increment fields on the DocWiki, and on caching updates on the DocWiki too. I've got a couple of links there. If you want to go on any of my training courses, I have level 1, which is for beginners or people who haven't very much experience in programming at all, or have some experience in programming in other languages, and they want to go to Delphi. And Delphi 2 will be a lot of stuff like caching updates on databases and the likes. So thank you very much for listening to my presentation here on auto-increment fields and caching updates. Sorry if I spoke too fast, but going through all this stuff in just 20 minutes is quite a challenge for me. I can now see I've used just over 22 minutes on this, but hey, it's all fun and games. And we now move on to saying that next time it's going to be on February 12th. It's going to be about ArrayDML data manipulation language, and that will be Pavak. And now it's time for some questions and answers, and I will gladly answer anything that I can. Thank you very much for attending the presentation, and please feel free to ask me anything. If I don't know the answer, I might make something up. No, I won't, but I'll just say I don't know. I will try, however, to answer. Thank you very much.
I'll bring in Pavak and JensFudge. Jens, are you there? And Pavel?
Hi there.
Hey, guys.
Yep.
Excellent. Some questions did come in, and Jens was answering a few, and I typed in one. Let's see. Alf was asking, since Oracle doesn't have auto-increment fields, but sequences, could FireDAC simulate auto-inc in Oracle, or do I still need to call the method to increase the sequence?
Yeah, Oracle does not support auto-increment, which is correct, and you can, I think you can in Oracle set the trigger to actually call the sequence on its own, so Oracle would do it without you having to call any method through Delphi. And then you can manually specify for exactly Oracle that this is the way you're doing it. And on one of the links that I put up there about auto-incremental on the DocWiki, there's a pretty good explanation on how to do that.
Yeah, let me put I'm going to put the links back up on the screen. Yeah. There we go. Okay. Let's see. Bjorn's asking. He's asking about scale, or size of databases and performance. What if you have 1 million records? This question can probably be applied to a lot of examples, he's saying.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't know what happens. I haven't tried 1 million records on this. 1 million records is quite a few records, so to be honest, I don't know.
All right, so there's the challenge, Pavel. You and me. I'll do something. I've got access to Oracle here in Scotts Valley, and then we've got SQL Server, MySQL interface, of course, Firebird. I don't think I have anything else that I have access to. Maybe to 80, whatever, access via ODB or something, and play.
Yes, I'm doing in the first week of March the ETL, extract, transform, and load webinar. So if we can make a 1 million table, that will be cool to try.
All right, I can just write an app to build. It also depends on, of course, how complex the data module is, the data model is, and the relationships and so on. But I'll play around. Let's see. Peter was asking about the trial editions architect, and then what about Pro? What about accessing databases and ODBC or native drivers and so on? And the general rule of thumb, of course, you could build architectures where you could do all sorts of things with with multi-tier and whatever. But in our professional product, FireDAC itself can only access local databases. So whether you're using ODBC or whether you're using SQL, direct connection on professional, it's local databases. So the things on the same IP address that your app is running on, not remote databases, regardless of the Connect technology. The FireDAC Client Server Pack and then the Enterprise and Above editions allow you to access remote SQL databases as well as build multi-tier data snap, enterprise mobility services, multi-tier solutions. But for example, the REST component library is included in Pro. And if you've got a REST service out there somewhere on the planet Earth that talks to a database and does stuff for you, and you're making a REST call and getting JSON back and doing something with it, assigning it to an in-memory data set like TFD memtable, then okay. But if you're going to use FireDAC and TFD connection and the FD query and all of these things, Pro gives you local access. Enterprise and Above or the client server add-on pack gets you to remote databases. Let's see. Auto Inc. is interesting. How would you create a GUID in FireDAC? Well, you can create a GUID in code. There's RTL code for creating GUIDs. I don't know if databases have a GUID stored procedure that you can use. Do you know if it's something related to why GUIDs and FireDAC?
I think the one thing is that the GUID is only on Windows because it's a Windows call to co-create GUID. So, but there are other possibilities to create unique identifiers.
Yep. Mac, you could use MAC addresses, or I mean, there's all sorts of combinations, right? You can play.
Yeah. Also, as part of the data snap, is there is a one function to actually generate unique. Unique IDs for sessions, so you can use this, but there's lots of possibilities. But to be honest, GUID is limited to just to Windows platform.
Let's see. Will save points cover multiple tables and queries?
I believe that it will, but the example I showed just now was with the decentralized cached updates model, which means that every dataset has its own cache. If you want to use a centralized cache model, you have to use a FD Schema Adapter, a TFD Schema Adapter, and there are some constraints on the database that has to be set up properly. And I'm pretty sure that save points does in fact work with the FD Schema Adapter too.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yep. FD.
It's a bit more complex. Actually, it's quite a bit more complex than using cached updates on datasets.
Yep. Okay. And we're getting back to the million. So okay, we're gonna do something with the million record march. Okay. Let's see. I like the battle of the updates part where he who updates wins, so that's fun. Does cache updates have advantage over transaction commit and rollback on local databases or remote databases? I guess it depends on how many updates you're doing. I mean, if you only do an occasional update, then there's no real difference. But if you're doing a lot of updates and you're updating the cache and then committing and then sending the cache, there might be a benefit.
Yeah, it could be one of the other. One of the advantages, obviously, with cached updates is you don't need to actually be in touch with the database.
Yep.
You could log off the database or not be connected at all, and then still use the cached updates. And then when you get the connection back, you can. If you start a transaction on a SQL server, it's going to lock the tables for other users, which could be a problem. So it depends on the setup.
Yep. Okay, I'm just trying to type and read at the same time. It's not possible. Would you please show the download link? Okay, it's up there now. Sorry, it's there. And then there's question. Laszlo's also saying the question was regarding Interbase and Firebird, and we've done no. Maybe somebody else has out in the world. We've done no public comparisons of Interbase and Firebird. They're based on similar core SQL engine from way back when, but Firebird has gone its way and Interbase has gone its way. If you go back to Interbase 6, that's when the fork happened for Firebird, was based on that. When we open sourced the SQL engine of Interbase back in Interbase 6, the Interbase has moved way beyond that. Firebird has done its thing as well. So comparisons, maybe somebody else might have done something, and it also depends on the test setup and harness that you do, apples to apples and so on. Let's see. Bjorn can provide a test database with massive records. So Bjorn, if you have a test database that you want us to play with, send me an email, davidi@embarcadero.com, davidi@embarcadero.com, and tell me where I can grab it, and I'll make sure and get it to Jens and Pavel, and we can play with it. And as far as somebody was asking again about Firebird 3, and while I haven't tested myself, when I asked Dimitri, was saying that support, I think it was Firebird 1.5 and above. I forget the base number, but all the way up to current versions. And of course, the FireDAC team is always updating things as new database versions come out and have new features and how to surface options for some of those. So let's see. Pat is asking, with the database update mode selected to allow other fields to have been changed in the live database, does the update routine return what other fields that have been changed?
I understand the question, but I'm not sure about the answer. But I don't think it will.
Yeah, I don't think,
without being completely.
Pavel, do you know if there's an auto refresh? I don't think there is.
No, I'm also not sure about the answer. It's actually it's like a kind of a tricky question.
But you could just call refresh.
Yeah, we just need to give it a try.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'll also forward a couple of these questions direct to Dimitri. The other thing that Dimitri always reminds us is post your questions on the FireDAC Forums. He is on the FireDAC Forums a lot, and he answers questions and also gets ideas and other things. So I will send these questions specifically to him, and it'll be a great blog post for me or Pavel to do with the answers. But also, if you want a more immediate feedback, go to the FireDAC news group, the forum, and post your question there. Dimitri answers them, and then he takes all of that, and it becomes part of the FAQ and the documentation as well. So that's always what he always guides us when he's doing a talk. For example, his Code Rage 9 talk about what's new in FireDAC that he did based on EXE 7. And he, again, during the Q&A, encouraged everyone to post their questions there. Let's see. I can see how cached updates can be used to prevent a bad internet connection, and maybe a good solution when working around that problem. Yep. I mean, that's part of it. It also, that's the sort of when you're in a remote connection and a mobile connection, or even in your desktop world. The other part is some solutions, you only have so many connections to the backend database. And so leaving the connection open and being used means another one of your applications may not be able to get in and do some of the things it needs to do with the database. So connecting, getting the data you need, caching it, changing the updates, disconnecting, and then connecting back up and applying the updates means that you can leverage your connection licenses depending on the database in a better way as well. I'm not saying that we're trying to cut out the the database vendors' revenue and whatever. I'm just suggesting that it might be more efficient to not always be connected to the database all the time. Okay. Let's see. Delayed update refresh issues. We've seen the DB grid is an issue or just something else. It was in the demo. Well, it has nothing to do specifically with DB grid. The DB grid is just being populated from the data that it's getting, right?
Yeah, it was just me that didn't put any refresh things in the code, so I had to press the button view cache every time.
Richard was asking, he did not understand the purpose of the first line of code where you select a record that doesn't exist to create a data set. Go ahead, Jens.
Yeah, the reason I have the where clause where 1 equals 2 is just actually to open an empty data set, because if I didn't have any where clause, I would potentially be retrieving all the records in this data set, and I just need an empty one so I can call into it. That's the only reason. It's just a small hack to get an empty data set out of a query.
Yeah, I do the same thing when I want to get the fields, and using the fields editor. I put a query. I never did 1 equals 0. I always do true equals false, but 1 equals 2 or anything that's not equal to the selected.
Anything that's false, yeah.
It'll still retrieve the metadata, and I get all the fields. So
yes, exactly. Yeah.
I do the exact same thing all the time. Okay.
Yeah.
Dante was asking where the samples are, and on the screen there you go, archersoft.dk/download/cachedupdates.zip. It's all right there. And you put the link in the Q&A log as well. Steve was asking about interbase, and particularly interbase and auto increment, where there isn't an auto increment field type. So what do you do about that? What does FireDAC do when you're talking to interbase, or even, for that matter, other databases?
Well, any database that doesn't have an auto increment, they'll probably have some sort of a generator and some trigger mechanisms. So you can, specifically on interbase, you can just use a generator and a before insert trigger. And when you've done that, there's on the doc wiki a very good explanation on how to set it up manually. It's on the link there too. If you look at the page with auto incremental fields in FireDAC, there's a bullet point, chapter number 3 is manual specifying, where it's explained how to do it.
It's on the screen right now.
Yeah, great.
That link that you put in. So
yes,
it goes down through all the different databases, and there's the answer about Firebird 3.0. That was from earlier. I'll find the guy who asked. He's asked a couple times, and I'll send him an email about Firebird 3. But again, there's the information by the different databases that are supported. So Richard followed up, looks like setting database active to true returns all records. You just want to open the data set without any records. Exactly. Yep. Yep. And then Hugo's just saying, very nice subject. How does it behave with master detail relationship? I think you showed that, right? With
no, not with, well, with auto increment fields I showed with master detail, but with cached updates I didn't, because that's a little bit more complex and I couldn't manage to fit it into this webinar. But the thing is that the cached updates that I was showing now was using the decentralized model of caching updates. If you want to use a centralized model, and that means that you can have master details, you'll need to have a TFD Schema Adapter dropped on your form and then handle the cached updates on there. And on the other link, on the link for caching updates, there's an explanation on exactly how to do that. That does require some different stuff on the database. You have to set it up with referential integrity and the likes in order for that to work. So, yes.
Yeah, I was just typing... it's the TFD Schema Adapter. There's an example of Schema Adapter. If you take a look at Marco Cantu's Code Rage 9 EMS Enterprise Mobility Services session with SQL databases, there was a C++ version and a Delphi version. and he shows two different example demos in that session. The second one uses the Schema Adapter, and he shows how the metadata and data for a master detail relationship comes over to the client application, in his case a mobile client, and how then once you, in the Schema Adapter, you set for the two data sets, you set you point the data sets to the Schema Adapter, and they pull out the pieces they need for the two different tables or queries, whatever it is on the other side. So check out TFD Schema Adapter in the FireDAC doc wiki. Lucas was saying sometimes you don't need to open a table to insert a new record. I mean, using this kind of approach to insert a new record, you need to open and retrieve records or not. But if you try using TFD command, just insert a new record, you can't get the auto inc fields generated. So how to manage that? It's not true that you, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the way to manage that is the way that I did it is just adding a where clause that where I did where 1 equals 2, which is always false. So that will just open an empty data set, and in that way I can just call insert and I'll get the primary key back from the auto-incremented key fields. It's correct if you do a TFD command with an insert SQL statement, you will not get the auto-increment field back, but well, it works if you do it the way that I showed you.
Yeah, I also I use true equal, t equals f or true equals false or anything that's always going to be false.
Exactly.
Still get the metadata and everything else, but you won't have to retrieve any. It won't retrieve any rows, so because the where clause is false. Yep. Does the FireDAC Delta hold two records, one for the original, one that change fields like a client data set? Go ahead.
Well, how it's done internally, and I'm not actually sure. The Delta holds, as far as I know, the difference of the original values and the current values. So the Delta would. I don't understand really if. What's the purpose of that question, actually?
I think he's wondering, as far as I remember, or as far as I know, the deltas are only the original fields, whatever, for fields that you change, just to make sure that when it tries to do the updates, it can verify that something else didn't get changed in between the time that you made the change, like in client data set, so that, as opposed to having it keep everything, but I'll double check and ask Dimitri.
Yeah. Interesting question.
But and I'm just saying, but I will ask Dimitri.
Yeah.
And let you know, as I have your email address from the registration, so I can get back to you. The other way is, as I always tell people, Dimitri hangs out. It's a good amount of time hanging out on the FireDAC forums, FireDAC news groups. So you can ask there.
Absolutely, yes.
He'll respond.
Dimitri's very active on the forum.
He uses that to capture frequently asked questions and information that goes into the doc wiki and into the help information as well. So let's see. Neville's asking, when reverting to save points, what happens if you made two changes in the same record, one before and one after the save point?
It should actually go back to, it should work the way that you expect. So if you make one change, then a save point, then another change, and then revert to the change save point, you'll go back to the save point before you changed the record the second time. Did that make sense?
I think so. I just said it should revert back to the save point before the second change if you've changed
exactly.
twice.